Now imagine a predominantly African American or Latino school. Already there aren't enough resources to give the students the tools and knowledge necessary to be successful. Now imagine that because of these deficiencies, students do not perform at the level the district or the state expects. What do you suppose should happen? Give more support to these schools? More funding perhaps? Or at the very least, schools should not have resources taken away from them. But this is exactly what happens to public schools in predominantly African American and Latino neighborhoods under the No Child Left Behind Act of 2001.
No Child Left Behind is very well meaning. It is an attempt to get students to a certain place. But because the playing field is not level, then it falls short by the year 2014. That all students in public schools would be proficient in English language arts and in math. If after 2 years the adequate yearly progress goals are not achieved, then again the sanctions start. The school is in improvement status, right? So there's sanctions for every year after that. The problem is that the funding is often inadequate. And if you're a Title I school, right, so you're already either low performing or low income, they really feel the effect of all of those sanctions. There isn't enough money to provide the students with what they need in order to pass the tests.
No Child Left Behind is taking us in the opposite direction in terms of starting to challenge the gatekeeping and the standards and the tests and the tracking and the even, in the so-called communities of privilege, the focus on achievement. No Child Left Behind feeds right into all of that stuff.
So children do get left behind.
So this person was writing an NCT and she was saying that there are first grade classrooms where students don't get up for 6 hours at a time. They're filling out, practice tests all day long because if they don't perform in the tests, everything hinges on that.
Standards are important because they provide us a measure through which we can gauge and track students' learning. However, with so much now dependent on the performance of students on standardized tests in the wake of No Child Left Behind, it seems as if no one is questioning the validity of these standardized tests, perhaps even coming to the conclusion that the standardized tests themselves are discriminatory, especially against African American and Latino students from working class backgrounds, and that in addition, university admissions policies provide the justification for these discriminatory standards.
It doesn't take into consideration just all of the structural inequalities that students face. It doesn't take into consideration any of that. And there isn't enough time to teach everything that's going to be on the test to students. And there isn't enough time to gauge students' learning. So, teachers just feel like their hands are tied. We know that SAT has a long history of being culturally biased. And it does not measure whether or not a student is going to perform well once they're at college. Like, that was what it was designed to measure, whether a student would perform well once they actually got to college. But it's it's used as a gatekeeping mechanism, right? So if my SAT score is 900, what school is going to look at me? They really don't gauge a person's intelligence. They're not a measure of intelligence. If you have the money to take, the Kaplan courses or, the SAT prep courses, if you got that money, then yeah, you're going to be set. But if you don't, then what?
I think it's Claude Steele at Stanford too, who's done all these studies where he brings in a group of students and he'll bring in a group of white males and he'll say, I'm going to give you a test. This is a test that white males do really badly on. and he'll hand it out and they'll do it, and their scores are low, and then he'll bring in another group of white males with give them the same test and say, this is a test that white males do great on, and the scores go up. And this is true for every demographic configuration, that you can think of. Just telling people that their demographic group does well on the test boosts their score. So what a huge disadvantage in terms of the achievement gap. We have all this publicity and knowledge about who does well on what, and apparently just knowing that will lower your score.
Well, historically, when you have a school that is multiracial, where you've got students of different ethnicities and backgrounds, generally and unfortunately you find African American students and Latino students in the lower tracks.
In the years after the Brown versus Board decision, integrated schools that couldn't close their doors to African American and Latino students developed a system of internal separation called tracking. The tracking system separates students into classes which best suit their individual capacity and ability. So what were Latino and African American students best suited for? Cooking, wood shop, auto shop, hairstyling, PE, secretary prep, and custodial work. School stated that these tracks were assigned based on intelligence and aptitude, but this was simply a cover for the often openly racist practices of most public schools. In fact, many Latino and African American students were placed in the lowest tracks based solely on their name. Does this system sound familiar? If it does, then it's because most schools continue to employ the system. Today it's called advanced placement.
But what's more concerning about the tracking system is what students are actually being prepared for. So if I'm in an AP class, then I'm being prepared for college, and I'm going to be advised to take classes that are going to help me meet either UC requirements or general college requirements. If I'm in a general track, I might not get that same feedback, or I might not be provided with that same amount or set of information or pieces of knowledge. If I'm in the lower track, I might not get it at all. Oftentimes, unfortunately, students who are in lower tracks might be from working class communities and not have parents or families who really know what it even is.
Unless you're a student that's savvy enough to be able to jump tracks, right? So unless you know how to work the system, you know how to negotiate with teachers and work extra hard to get out of a lower track, then you will be stuck in a lower track. And once a student is stuck in a lower track, with lower tracks come lower expectations oftentimes. Not always, but oftentimes.
Teachers are primarily white, and they see primarily what they've been conditioned to see by their place in structures of inequality, and they assign students particular places that have very little to do with their merit and everything to do with the cultural capital that the student comes in with, that the teacher recognizes because it's similar to her cultural capital or his cultural capital, and it gets rewarded. So there's all these kind of built-in ways that success, what looks like merit, is actually gaming the system. I mean, I don't know if there's a better way to say it.